Interesting.
So we're going to go on to, you were talking about, in the last session that we did together, you were talking about some of the kind of hot things that you need to do. A lot of customers of ours, they say to me, the problem with Candidate ID, a lot of potential customers say the challenge with Candidate ID is going to be that we're going to need to create a lot of content. And my advice is you can be a very, very powerful communicator and generate a lot of goodwill with people if you are a curator. And so I wanted to talk to you a bit about the whole issue around repurposing content. And I know that you've put together a bit of a checklist of things that you think we need to be thinking about. So why don't you give us some of your hot kind of tips around content and repurposing?
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things we talk about when we are talking to a new client, prospective client, is two things, really. One is obviously choice of channel. There isn't a requirement for everybody to do everything all the time. And, which speaks to what we've been talking about is, just because there is Instagram doesn't mean you need an Instagram policy or a strategy if you decide that is not right for you. Instagram, for example, works very well on luxury brands, because it's a highly visual medium, and but for everybody else, maybe not. So there's no harm, no foul in deciding not to do a channel. I think, and having the confidence to do that. Then we talk about.
Just on that, I mean, that's actually one that I've never done. So Instagram's one that I went on to, I had a look around and I just went, this isn't for me. And I left after about 15 minutes because it seemed to be visual things to me are often very superficial, and I'm not interested in superficial things. And that's why Instagram didn't appeal to me. And I often say, people say to me, how's Instagram useful for recruitment? And my response is, it's the best channel for finding and hiring narcissists and sycophants.
Right. Well, possibly. It's very good for luxury brands. So luxury brands, Bentley, for example. I think I'm right in saying Bentley don't use Facebook and do 90% of their stuff through Instagram, because it's a ultimately incredibly visual lifestyle channel. So you're right. I struggle to think instantly how it would be a recruitment channel, but I'm sure someone out there will tell us if we're wrong. But the point being, choose your channel. You don't have to do everything. Secondly, again, most clients will say, well, I don't have the budget, I don't have the capability or the resource to produce, the sort of content or the sheer volume of content that we would need to be a destination. And I think I don't really know what that means. When I used to work at the Telegraph. To be a news site, they talk about 6 pieces of content a day before you'd even start to be regarded as a news destination. And who apart from a national newspaper has got that sort of time or resource? But that doesn't mean you can't do a targeted, very good job within your particular area. So first things first is to really look at what you already produce. The first thing we would say to anybody is talk to colleagues in marketing department, talk to colleagues out within the HR department, within the internal comms department, talk to the sales team. What sales collateral do they have? There's a huge amount of information that most businesses will be disseminating through a number of different channels that you can either use straight in a straight cut and paste or repurpose. So, sales now is very largely data led. The decisions on sales channels are data led. So if they're leading with and have done their work around data, and I'm sure they have, there's going to be a plethora of stuff that you can take and either quote directly or repurpose. Audience numbers, number of interactions, engagement with the product, why people are engaging with the product, feedback from clients, what they love about the company. All this stuff can be either quoted or repurposed for the recruitment messaging and the candidate messaging. Don't forget, a particular bugbear of mine is the belief that recruitment marketing has to follow every single marketing rule. In a way, you've got you've done your segmentation before any sort of broadcast message that you might send out, so that you can almost move into a keep warm, much more detailed, much more personalized messaging, before any broadcast or straightforward marketeer might do. So, a lot of the channels and a lot of the content that you're able to use and repurpose will by definition be quite narrowcast, because you're talking to people in a certain job with a certain skill set. So talk to colleagues. Yeah, would be my first checkpoint.
Carrie's made a good point, which is actually, we're talking about Instagram there. She saw a JavaScript developer on Instagram, and his hashtag JavaScript showed up in stories, and so I guess finding people based on what they're hashtagging in Instagram. I mean, JavaScript's not a very visual thing, is it? But I guess you can find people based on that. So from a sourcing perspective,
I'm not sure. I don't know. Again, Carrie will know far better than I. My slight take on that, obviously there's stuff out there now talking about social footprints. I'm not sure necessarily what it is about Instagram that would be my channel of choice. I just think if I were seeking to have my three main recruitment channels, Instagram might not be it. And as I say, that's not prescriptive, but I think the idea holds that you can choose which channels you want to work in and have the bravery to walk away from some.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, if you're recruiting Java developers, then or JavaScript developers, sorry, quite honestly, you are going to have a different mix, because something like LinkedIn, for example, may well not feature at all.
Absolutely.
Using things like GitHub, for example, or Stack Overflow. So
exactly, I think the point stands, which is that you don't have to do everything, and
yes,
and the desire to chase your tail of you have to do everything now. What's our policy?
Yeah,
I think is the wrong way around I think it's the wrong way around to look at it.
Yeah.
So second on the list, then, when we talked about talk to colleagues, as much as you can pre-plan. So both writing and distribution. So a piece can be used. A piece of content can generate its own kind of calendar. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you can use a big piece of work over an extended period of time, depending on how you put it together, if you plan it right. So, I think you mentioned motoring not long ago. You might talk about the advent of winter tires. Well, that winter tires can generate its own calendar of content, if that makes sense. Its own future planning. So that's going to come up the same time every year. Mm-hmm. There's going to be facts and figures. You can pull those out and use those to trail it. You can use those on Twitter to highlight what's coming up. You can also use it, turn it into a lifestyle piece. What else? Where might one be driving on winter? This sort of stuff. So if you plan it rather than believe that a single piece of content is to serve a single need, then I think you can punch well above your weight in terms of what you're required to produce to have a bigger hit with candidates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Start big if you can. So what we talk about is, there's thought and practice leadership pieces. White papers is kind of the phrase du jour, but actually, they are relatively expensive to write. So if you are going to have them commissioned, or you've got them internally, pull them apart first and decide how you want to roll them out. So it might be that you want to roll them out as a single standalone piece, as an announcement to the industry on your thought process. That's fine, but you can also fillet them for facts and turn them into listicles. You can fillet them for interesting headlines. There's a stat that says something like 4 out of 5 people stop reading after the headline. So actually, within that white paper, there might be 20 headlines you could pull out of it.
I just want to quickly tell you something, because you just used the word listicles. It's the second time I've heard listicles in the last couple of days. My wife who's a marketing director, was talking about various different forms of content. And she said, lists, for example, or listicles. And then she said, tests, for example, or testicles.
well, I do.
Yeah. No, that was. She'd already done about 5 or 6 before that, but then she came on to listicles and then testicles. But anyway,
just as a side point, on a list, if you are doing lists, always have an odd number, never an even. Odd numbers are strangely regarded as strangely specific. So the assumption is you've done your research. If you do top 10, people assume that you have just pulled together 10 that you could think of. If you do 9, people assume that you have filtered them.
Interesting. So, yeah, it gives it more credibility. That you're thinking
more credibility and a higher click-through rate. So
wow. Okay.
So
that's terrible, but true. Okay.
True. Yeah. Always try and come up with an odd number. 17 things to know about whatever.
Yeah, because they think there's no fillers in there. People think there's no fillers in there. There is only 17 things, and these are all of them, and it's comprehensive. It's probably
if it was 20, I'd probably made a load up because I needed to get to 20. But if it's 17, then obviously I made less up. But
very good.
Yeah. So yeah, just as a side point, but start big is my point. And if you can, take these content and fill at them first to decide. You can roll out a single piece of content over an extended piece of time. There's nothing wrong with splitting source material. So if you are announcing something, or you've done a piece of research, or you are talking about a new way of working, flexible working, regional working, whatever it might be, there's nothing wrong with taking some of that and using it for future use, saving it for future use, and getting double your bang.
Yeah, because
actually people want to have useful information presented to them in a bite-sized chunk, possibly, and will be prepared to wait a week or two, and actually you get double the bang for your buck, and it almost moves into a kind of a keep warm campaign where you're advising people rather than an announcement, which is a monologue rather than a dialogue. Yeah. So you can take all that stuff out, and in terms of repurposing, things like you might repurpose into a different format. So if you've got a piece of prose, that's very easily changed into things like a Q&A. If you've got a list of facts, then you could do it into a quiz. Picture galleries, for example. So if you are doing an announcement, or you are doing, a talk on your new offices, picture galleries are fantastic for traffic and are fantastic for social media. The visual, thumbnails on Facebook, on YouTube, and things like that, on Twitter, on tweets. If you can use an image, far higher click-through rates.
Okay, let me just quickly show you something. So, share screen, and my colleague Scott McRae wrote a blog a long time ago, like about 2 years ago, and we turned it into lots of little like kind of caption type things.
Yeah.
Best of. Could you see this? Yeah.
Yes. I haven't seen it. No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, no, but can you see it just now?
I can see it. Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Number one. Best of Scott McRae. Candidates consume information on their phones in erratic micro moments on the way to and from work. Talent acquisitions challenges to get share of mind with everyone they might hire now or in the future.
Absolutely.
That's from exactly the same blog. Number 2, best of, and we got 9 of these. Almost all recruitment marketing is akin to net fishing. Blah blah blah. So we turned that into, quite a lot of different little images with a quote in them. So there's lots of different little things that you can do like that, and I do like the idea of filleting content.
Quotes are fantastic. So if you can, if you can include a quote, and there's a slight dichotomy here because the kind of banal inspirational quote that can be overused, can be, but if you can choose a relevant quote, they perform very well. They perform very well in gaining interest and engagement and click-throughs. So so quotes are very good, images are very good, statistics are very good. So 72% of statistics are made up, obviously, but if you can use a relevant statistic as a headline, that's what people engage with. That's what people way most people click away after reading the headline. If you can get it into the headline, that's great. Just to make the point about picture galleries, there is a reason that most newspapers will show you children playing in daffodils every springtime, pretty girls unveiling their A-level results, fields covered with snow during winter. There is a reason for that. They are fantastic for traffic. They are fantastic for engagement, and nobody ever clicks away from a picture gallery. So halfway through, if they start it, they always go to the end broadly. So if you can use a picture gallery, if it's relevant, then I would use that. And again, you talk to your colleagues, you will have things that you can, your sales department will be driving a lot of this data that will be sitting in somebody's bottom drawer that you can use for a compelling story. Yep,
that's true.
Using content more than once is not old news. So I'm amazed how many clients retweet or don't redistribute content that they've sent out on social media, particularly social media, obviously things like LinkedIn and Twitter I'm thinking of particularly. They talk about, Twitter talk about retweeting up to 3 or 4 times a day before you see any drop off in engagement. And actually, the analogy we used to use was between print and digital in general was that of a car. If you spent £15,000 on a car, you wouldn't expect £150 worth of digital car to do the same job. You might have to buy 20 of them, but you still save money. And I think don't be frightened to retweet. Don't be frightened to redistribute. There's nothing wrong with that. You can change keywords. You can change top and tail. You can tag it differently for a different journey potentially. But there's nothing wrong with using it again and again.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
The other thing is, again, for repurposing content, use industry calendars. Again, it's amazing. I don't know whether you saw the Times yesterday had a double page spread in for their Chartered Institute of Management results. So they had 2 very, very dull typewritten pages of whatever it was, 15,000 people who have taken and passed But that every year will become, additional circulation, obviously, but also it'll become a calendar point around which people who have got that qualification will always buy, will always engage, will always consume, both on and offline. It's funny to me, or it's quite surprising to me when you talk to clients about what are the big calendar events that the people they want to talk to are interested in, and they haven't done any research on it. And if you're the content around that calendar event, you can piggyback on with your interpretation, with some commentary, with, et cetera, maybe the CEO quote or whatever it might be. But you can use that content to drive your message. And there's no cost for you.
No, it's a good one. Absolutely. In terms of recruitment, we often do that around some of the big events. Something like RecFest, for example, we often do something which is focused on RecFest, or Unleash, or there's a few that we would do that kind of thing around. So that's another good.
And absolutely, but there's a kind of a whole. I've worked in the past with a lot of institutions. So ACCA in accountancy, or SEMA, or ITT in travel, and they are producing content for a specialist audience. 90% of which goes under the wire. That actually their remit is to distribute. So if you can help with that, you know, and could comment on it or give it a fresh challenge or a fresh distribution, then you are helping them and you're not paying, bluntly. You know, there's a lot out there, and actually you're right, things like RecFest are fantastic, things like the Case Conference in Education, things like RAD Awards if you're in recruitment advertising agents, you know, that's absolutely, but there's loads more out there. You know, and it doesn't take long to find it, actually.
Absolutely.
And similarly, national events, I mean, you know, things like clearing for education, things like institute announcements of results, Black Friday, you know, A-level results day, GCSE results day, national apprenticeship days, you know, things like that. Actually, if you're not piggybacking on that, then you can almost be sure that your competitors might be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You will definitely miss out if you're not on top of that. So let's think about recruitment specifically. So things like, when exam results get announced and things like that, that of course is a good one. The other one would be, I guess, at the end of summer, because a lot of people go away for summer or whatever, they say, I'm going to come back and I'm going to get a new job at the end of summer. And also new year, new career. That's another one that's, you know.
Climb every mountain, new challenge. Yeah, so all those. Yeah, but it's true. And actually, I mean, you know, one of the things we tried to do in the past actually was get data from holiday companies about who was coming back. You know, because what we wanted to do then was, you know, hit passive candidates when on return from holiday to be looking to move. So all that sort of thing. It's possible. Travel company was you know, GDPR is probably a little bit difficult because it's not under fair usage, but that sort of thing. It's kind of thinking a bit laterally.
Yeah, I mean, January is a good one. People make changes in January much more often than they do at any other time of the year.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
I mean, January is a pretty loose definition of a national event, but you know, it is. In this context, it is one.
It does. I mean, you're right. So the peaks in recruitment always used to be January and September. And I know from a media point of view that kind of it was about a seventh of the year in terms of transactions used to be done in January. So, you know, absolutely, it's flattened out over the last 5 years or so. And from a kind of a noise point of view, don't forget that's the area around which you're going to be competing most.
Of course.
You know, so it's you know, it's not an unlooked, you know, not a complete bonus, but you know, in terms of repurposing content, the number one thing I would say is, you know, two things: use what content is already out there, and speak to colleagues.
No, absolutely.
So I think I mean, I was just talking about old content is no bad thing. I was looking at Forbes. You know, Forbes.com. They do 50% of their traffic on a daily basis is to content that's 3 months old or older. So
yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
You know,
it's not at all surprised.
Old does not mean bad, and you don't have to constantly reinvent the wheel. If you want to refresh it, that's you know, that is a question of you know, maybe a headline, pulling out a different statistic, pulling out a different what we call topping and tailing. But there's plenty of ways of doing that. You know, maybe change the tags, maybe change the journey to and from. But repurpose that way. Yeah.
Okay. Lots of really, really good techniques there. And I mean, I do say to a lot of people every single week, if not certainly every couple of days, I will say to people, you do not need to create loads of unique content in order to thrive in taking a content-led approach. There's so much content you can use. One other one that I wanted to mention was, I mean, other people's content that you can share, as long as you don't claim it's your own, then it's a really, really useful thing of generating credibility through association and through association with the subject, for example. Yes.
My friend, also, when you talk about purchase funnels, you know, and we talked about this in June. You know, there's that element of advice. it's kind of inspire, educate, and advise. Being the purchase funnel that people talk about, and so that's why and the advice part of that is I saw this and thought of you. It shows. It shows that your audience. If you can put in front of them stuff that you saying, well, I think you guys will find this interesting, and here's our thoughts on it. You start to enter that personal relationship with your candidates, whether they are, driven to apply that week, or whether they just are driven to engage with you or to remember you when they are looking, the following January, for example. So absolutely, it's that advice element. It's that personalization that says, I saw this and I thought of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to mention one, in fact, two examples. One is Hung Lee's brilliant recruiting brain food newsletter, which comes out at about 10 o'clock every Sunday morning. It's full of content, almost none of it's Hung's. Not that he's not a great content producer, he is, but he curates all of the best recruitment content that he's seen that week, and he puts it into this newsletter, and it's got a really, really fast growing following. So that's one example. And then another one is,
Cool.
you were going to respond to that.
Well, I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, absolutely. My thoughts, if you set yourself up to be the font of all knowledge within your particular industry, you're setting yourself up to fail. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And it's just so difficult to do that I don't think anyone with unlimited funds could do it. And so actually it's quality, and it's little, your comment on the news of the day is where the value is. And there's another one. There's Wonky in higher education, which comes out every Monday morning, Wonk HE, and it's a fantastic sort of roundup of the week's news and things you should be thinking about this week. It's so powerful. Now, to do that is probably beyond the resource of most talent attraction professionals, but there's no reason why you can't use it as a starting point for your conversation.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. I mean, I stick to my swim lane when it comes to what I actually create content about. And even though I'm in recruitment technology, I wouldn't put forward a view or a blog, or I wouldn't really write about something like assessment, because I don't really know very much about it. I know about talent attraction, and I know about nurturing talent relationships and creating talent pipelines and that kind of thing. And I there's, even within recruitment, you can split it up into half a dozen different categories, of which 4 I'm not really going to be creating content about. Commenting on related subjects is something that I would do, though, and sharing.
That's an interesting one. So there's something called re-expression, which take an industry which has a similar issue to your own at its simplest point, and see how they have solved it. So there's a lot of kind of examples that people know about. One is the Formula One team that helped the team of surgeons design an operating theatre, because both of them had to do very complicated things in as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Obviously a Formula One car had 8 people working on it for 10 seconds to get it out the door, and they helped design an operating theatre, because that's got 8 people working on, it's slightly more serious, but it's re-expression. So everyone talks about, the Toshiba wall-mounted photocopier, I don't know, because they looked at sewage pipes and how they blocked. I don't know whether you know these examples, but what they did at Toshiba was they looked at what the main cause of blockage in their photocopiers was, and they couldn't work it out. And of course, they looked at who else was dealing with blockages, and they came up with sewage works, and how did they solve it? And it was long straight lines, so they built a wall-mounted photocopier. Actually there's an awful lot to be learned from looking at other industries, and if you can be the one that's bringing this to the attention of any particular group that you want to deal with, you get the credibility of being someone who thinks a little bit differently.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Lots and lots of great tips there.